All right, let's get started. So let me share my screen and press play on the presentation. I'm recording this a little late at night because my first recording was around 30 minutes long, and that was just way too much. So, all right, tropes.robert. So as you guys know, my system is for developing a trope. We're going to be looking at butchery. I quickly have here a definition of trope. According to tvtropes.org, it's a literary device used. It could be pretty much anything, like a character trait or element of a narrative structure, but it's like a building block of a story, and it helps convey information without directly explaining it to the audience. Stuff like the anti-hero, men act, women are. Couple of examples of tropes. We're going to be looking at butchery. Our three pieces of media. I have a list right down there. But since this is about like finding symbolism and imagery, the two kind of best fields of communication studies are semiotics and narratology. And of those two, narratology, narrative and meaning by Gerald Prince, and semiotics, the basics, are kind of really good kind of stepping stones that I use to help develop the system, the ORCA system. So we're gonna do butchery because there's not a page for it on tvtropes.com. Not that TV Tropes is like the end all be all. It's just that TV Tropes is easily accessible, so a lot of people can edit it, but that means that a lot of people can confirm, yes, that's a trope, no, that's not a trope. And there isn't a page for it on butchery. So that's what we're going to try to develop. And we're going to look at Le Traversée de Paris, Gangs of New York, and Game of Thrones. That's an ORCA. The ORCA is the test. It stands for Organize Object, Record Reactions, Collect Context, and Assess Answers. And we'll look at the three images that we're going to use, and I'll kind of explain what all of those are and just my findings, because we don't have time to break down each individual image. So this is Le Traversée de Paris. Part of the ORCA test is Organize Object. So that would be to look at the imagery kind of on its own. Determine, so like with Le Traversée, you're gonna basically take this still and kind of glean what information you can just from the image. You know, like our main character, Bourville, he's center right. What's he doing? That pig there, it's very stressed out. What's he doing? Kind of determine that sort of thing. The next step is to record reactions, which is to just talk about how, how did you feel about the image, right? How did you interpret it? What are your feelings about it? And are those what were intended by the director or writer or editor or actor? This is the image from Gangs of New York that we used. And this is a good one to talk about context. So with context, it's that's about kind of discussing a little more so the story as a whole and a little more real world information. So like Gangs of New York is set in the 1860s in New York. So talk about, if there's anything you know about that, talk about that in collect context. Talk about stuff like, this is where you talk about like, what's the relationship between these characters? What are their goals? Where does this scene like take place within the whole story? This is where you find out what's happening beyond just what is visible in the one shot. And this is our shot from Game of Thrones. And the last step is to assess answers. And that's where after you have done those three steps for all of your imagery across all the different pieces of media, that's where you compare. In assess answers, you look for consistencies between your answers. So if butchery consistently made you react a certain way, or if butchery was, or if an image was consistently framed a specific way. That's where, in assess answers, that's where you'd kind of collect that and look at everything. And that's how you start to build a trope. And I did successfully come up with something. It's not a complete trope. There needs to be a little bit more data, and that's one of the limitations of the whole study, is that there just wasn't enough time to, there just wasn't enough pieces of butchery to really get a look at. I know that people had suggested Sweeney Todd, but that's just murder. That's not butchery. But we did come up with an answer. This is based on, so this wording is also taken a little bit from another TV trope page about characters called the Butcher. So when depicting butchery itself, not just a character who's called the Butcher, characters named the Butcher are to be feared for their physical strength. They're imposing and intimidating characters. But characters who are butchers are to be feared for their intellect. And we can see that with Tywin Lannister and with Bill the Butcher. All right, and that's my presentation. I think we have time for questions. I'm just kidding. This is a recorded video. There are no time for questions. All right, have a good night. Bye-bye.